Our program today deals with interest-based problem-solving process. This is a technique that we use with groups and with teams to help identify and resolve real problems and issues within the workplace by involving and engaging employees in identifying and developing workable solutions. My name is Jim Coles, and I'm the Executive Director of Columbus Area Labor Management Committee.
And I'm Meredith Porterfield, Program Manager for Columbus Area Labor Management Committee.
In our program today, our goal is to present the basic steps of interest-based problem solving and how the process works, and discuss some of the concerns and some things that you need to know in order to effectively implement interest-based problem solving in your organization.
Before we get started on the interest-based problem-solving process, we're going to talk a little bit about traditional problem solving and what ordinarily happens. Under most traditional problem-solving processes, they can be positional, in that a person can come in with their idea on how to resolve the particular problem. Also, what can happen is traditional problem-solving processes can be power-based, or they can be resolved through rights, contracts, laws, work rules, things of that nature. This has a tendency to make this type of problem-solving process adversarial or argumentative, and that means that it can be time-consuming. And maybe it will be you can't even resolve the problem, but you've wasted all that time. We have a tendency sometimes also to come in and focus on one particular idea on just how it is that we're going to resolve the problem. That idea may or may not work, and if it doesn't work, we've wasted our time and we have to start all over again on the process. So we want a problem-solving process that will actually solve problems without placing any blame, since that's the knee-jerk reaction of a traditional problem-solving process is that we want to place blame on an individual or something. Instead, we want to focus on something that will improve the system, the organizational system, and something that provides mutually beneficial, something that is mutually beneficial to everybody so that they can work together to help each other out. In addition, we want to try to build trust levels that can help develop the relationship. Now, interest-based problem solving is based on the techniques of interest-based bargaining, for those of you who are familiar with labor negotiation. It has different adaptations and different names, such as win-win or principal negotiations, but it can be applied to different types of settings in addition to labor negotiations. For example, we've heard it's used in family court situations. We've also heard people using it in customer service problems. Interest-based problem solving also focuses on solving the problem. We don't take positions with it, and we don't focus on the individual personalities that are involved in the problem-solving process. Some things that you need to know about the interest-based problem-solving process are that it's not an easy process. It requires trust and honesty. You need to share some information, and this can sometimes be difficult, especially at first, because we have to reveal a little bit more about ourselves than we care to sometimes. We have to talk or reveal our thoughts and our concerns. And the other thing about the interest-based process is that it has some very specific steps that we aren't used to under a traditional problem-solving process. And these steps must be followed in a distinct order. We need to follow good brainstorming guidelines with the interest-based process. In other words, the better the brainstorming or the longer the list, the more effective process you're going to have with your interest-based process. You make decisions by consensus, and if you're not familiar with consensus decision-making, or you're not comfortable with consensus decision-making, it may be that you're going to need some help with consensus decision-making. You might want to get some outside assistance with that and practice that decision-making method. There is a learning curve with the interest-based process. It takes a little bit of time to go over it. We suggest that you start slow. And also, it might be best to have some assistance as you learn this process. You will need a flip chart or a portable whiteboard or a smartboard, something that you can use to follow good brainstorming guidelines to record ideas and get those ideas down on paper or whiteboard. These are the steps to the interest-based problem-solving process that I referred to earlier. The first one is to brainstorm and record a list of problems. Then for each problem, you want to identify and record the separate interests of the parties involved. For example, if you're in a labor management situation, you might want to identify labor's interests first, then you're going to identify management's interests next. After that, you're going to identify the shared interests. And you'll be surprised how many shared interests you have. And as you work through other problems through the interest-based process, you'll identify even more interests that you have in common. The fourth step is to brainstorm and record a list of possible options to resolve the problem. And notice that options is plural because there is always more than one way to resolve the problem. You want to develop and record a list of standards, judge options to those standards, and then come to consensus on a solution. Now, when groups first start out with the interest-based process, they're a little confused as to what we mean about the term interest. And interests are our concerns, our wants, our needs, our desires, or our fears. They're backed by our basic needs, such as security, economic sense of well-being, recognition, control over one's life. They are what drives the interest. They are behind those interests. And they also tell us why we are wanting to resolve the problem that we're working on.
The steps in the interest-based problem-solving process are very important. It's important that we follow those steps in the specific order, that we don't skip steps. We begin by identifying the problems or the issues that are involved. You may have been part of solving a problem before when that solution was implemented, it caused other problems, because we didn't spend the time in that case to really explore all of the details of the problem and all of the issues associated with it. We want to be careful we identify the root causes of the problems we're working on and the impact that it will have. And we also want to be sure that we're dealing with problems, not symptoms. Symptoms are effects, not the cause. Treating those symptoms is never effective at solving the underlying problem. We want to deal with root causes, and we make sure that we do a detailed analysis on our problems in step one. Next, we identify the interests. We brainstorm both sides' interests. We put them on a flip chart. We try to develop as long a list of interests as possible so we clearly identify what things are important to each party. Next, we'll identify mutual interests. Normally what we do is we'll go back through the flip chart and we'll circle those interests that are common to both parties. You're probably going to find there are many mutual interests. By identifying those mutual interests, we will try to craft solutions that are based on those common interests. That's the difference between interest-based problem solving and traditional problem solving. In traditional problem solving, we focus on where we're apart. Sometimes it's hard to bridge that gap when we just focus on where we're apart. By focusing on what we have in common, we can develop solutions that are satisfactory to everybody that help resolve the problem. So in step 4, we do that. We develop options or solutions that are based upon those mutual interests. It's a brainstorming process. We want to develop a long list. Sometimes we fall into what we call the fallacy of the single solution. We think there's only one way to solve a problem. We may walk in with that idea in mind, and once we have that one solution, we stop thinking. After all, we already know the answer. We don't have to think any more about it. Yet, in fact, for any problem other than the most elementary thing, there's always more than one good potential solution. In interest-based problem solving, we want to find as many of them as we can. We want to put them up on the flip chart. We want to develop that long list, because in that long list of possible solutions will be the best ones. We'll follow those brainstorming guidelines. The more ideas, the better. As we do that, we don't evaluate possible solutions. Evaluation breaks the flow of the brainstorming, can also make people a little bit more reluctant to put their ideas up there. There'll be time later when we can discuss and we can debate ideas when we're analyzing our options. But for right now, we want to brainstorm that long list. Next, we develop our standards. And sometimes it's hard for people to think about standards, but we use them all the time. Anytime we have to make a decision, whether it's about what have lettuce to buy in the store or any other type of problem we're trying to resolve, we have some basis for how we're making that decision. Those are our standards. In interest-based problem solving, those standards need to be specific so that we understand exactly what is meant by each of the standards. They need to be measurable so that we know whether an option will or will not meet that standard. And they need to be objective, not based upon the positions of one party or another in that problem. We found over the years that 3 standards can be used with most problems, particularly labor management situations. Those are the standards of workability. If a solution doesn't work, there's no reason to consider it any further. Solutions must be mutually beneficial. Based upon those mutual interests that everybody has, the solution has to represent a gain for each party involved. And they must be cost effective, because no matter how good a solution might be, if we can't afford it, we can't do it. We brainstorm and record that list of standards on a flip chart. And then we do some list narrowing so that we have no more than about 5 significant standards. If we've got a long list of standards, it's possible to eliminate virtually any option we come up with based on trivial things. We don't want to do that. We want to have significant, important standards on which to judge our options. And we recommend no more than 5 because it can tend to bog down the process when you have more. Once we identify the standards, we put a letter next to each one. We encourage you to use letters rather than numbers because we find it to be a little bit less confusing. Then in step 6, we judge the options with those standards. We'll take each option that we've come up with and compare it to each of the standards. We'll take option 1 and say, does that meet standard A? Does it meet standard B? Does it meet standard C? And so on. When it does, we'll put a letter of that standard next to the option. If an option doesn't meet the standards, we cross it out. Because if it doesn't meet the standards, then it's not an acceptable solution to all parties. We go through this with all of the options. What will emerge from that will be a list of options that meet our standards. Each of these options that meets our standards is a potentially acceptable solution to the problem. There's usually more than one. So we'll take a look at the remaining potential options. We'll prioritize them, we can combine them, we can do pilots, whatever it is based upon the particular problem in your situations to come up with the option or options that become the final solution to our problem. Some other thoughts on the interest-based process is we encourage you to start small. Pick a small problem. You can work up to harder ones as you go along. It's just like when you learn mathematics. You didn't start with calculus. You started with basic whole number arithmetic. As you've got more comfortable with it and built your skills, you can move further. The same is true in interest-based. We want to start with a small problem. We want to be able to work up to more and more difficult problems as your comfort level with the process, as your skills with the process increase. We strongly encourage you to have the steps in front of the group. Go through each step that's there. Having the steps in front of you encourages the group to follow the steps and helps reinforces those steps. If you skip a step, it can cause you problems later on. This will be a slow process at first. Don't get frustrated with it, because the longer you use it, the more natural it will become to you. Your speed will pick up, and it will become second nature to go through this interest-based process. Be sure that you don't fall into the trap of being positional or revert to other traditional behaviors that get in the way of problem solving. You want to focus on the problem and upon developing the best possible solutions. To do that, we use a flip chart or something to record the ideas on so that everybody can see them, so they're always in front of people. Interest-based problem solving works with other types of problem solving as well and integrates well with them. For example, if you're familiar with the steps of continuous improvement process, there are various tools and techniques that we use in those processes to collect and to analyze data. Those processes work well throughout the interest-based process, whether it's in helping to identify the specific problem and its causes, or determining how we're going to measure and evaluate a standard. Those steps integrate into the process. The other thing is we encourage groups the first couple times they do this to have somebody to help them, somebody who can provide some coaching to get through the process, to help reinforce the correct steps, and to assist them as they work through. That's our program today on interest-based problem solving. If you'd like more information about interest-based problem solving or assistance in developing a problem-solving process in your organization, give us a call at Columbus Area Labor Management Committee. Our website is listed there. We hope to hear from you, and we thank you for being part of our program on interest-based problem solving.